Hello and welcome to the program. Your host, Ron Whitlock. The booming Hispanic population in political swing states is creating both opportunities and headaches in both political parties as they try to court the Latino vote. Republicans in particular are scoring points on traditional issues of faith and national security, but at the same time, the Republicans and their party are frustrating Latinos with what many of them see as harsh anti-immigration rhetoric. The political battleground for both the Democrat and Republican parties going into the Democratic and Republican presidential cycle November 2008, just not too long away from right down today. And we have two individuals here to tell you and I what they think about the fact that almost undoubtedly now, we think, and many people think, that Hispanic Mexican Americans, predominantly along the U.S.-Mexico border, probably going to be electing the next president of the United States. Right, Aaron Pena? Right, Carlos Ortiz?
That's exactly right.
Aaron Pena, Democrat Party National Committee man, drafted the platform in 2004. He was on that committee at the National Convention. Sitting next to him, conservative Carlos Ortiz, pastor and a member of CONLAMIC, which is a Christian organization of 18,000 pastors and preachers, priests, and others across the United States. First of all, Pastor Ortiz, explain to the audience what is CONLAMIC.
CONLAMIC is a political action committee organized by a group of Hispanic churches, Catholic, Baptist, Assemblies of God, across the board. Nothing satanic. They're not allowed. And they got themselves together so that they could formulate a voice kind of representing this diverse culture we call the Hispanic market, or however you want to say it. And that's what CONLAMIC is about. It's a political action committee represented by a large group of churches.
Does it predate in any way the ascension of the Hispanic, Mexican American, Puerto Rican American, Cuban American becoming the number one minority voting bloc and group in the United States?
Oh yeah, no, it's been around,
prior to that.
Yeah, decade and a half. It's been a while for a very long time, yes.
But after it started, obviously President Bush made a big use of it, as did other Republican candidates and some Democrat candidates running for office.
Oh yes, actually, they're very heavy especially with these issues that have been coming up with immigration and so on. Both parties actually set up a system where they call it the Spanish hotlines, where members of Congress, when they get into their committee meetings, they all actually turn on 50, 80, 100 churches at the same time, the pastors, and they're all on a conference call listening to the discussions going on and putting in their 2 cents. And it's across the board. It's not just in Texas, it's in all the states throughout the United States.
So they're in a committee room, smoke-filled or otherwise, D.C., U.S. Capitol.
The politicians will be where they're at in Washington. The pastors are in their office. And they have mass callings to all these pastors already organized.
Maybe discussing a bill dealing with Hispanic issues.
Correct. Asking their advice.
Great, great. Aaron Pena, you're aware of this group. You've seen them do their thing. You've seen them over time move a little bit more toward President George Bush, helping him get elected President of the United States.
Well, it started with Ronald Reagan. The so-called Reagan Democrats were the conservative or independent Democrats, many of them social conservatives, which included Hispanics. George Bush kind of jumped on that, and although it's arguable even to this day,
carried it forward.
Got about 44% of the vote. And presently, that's kind of fallen back because of the immigration debate. Although Hispanics have a variety of opinions about the immigration debate, polls show us about split on the issue as to whether or not we want comprehensive reform or something else. But the tone and the rhetoric has kind of sent the message to a number of Hispanics that maybe the Republican Party is not for them. And so you will see polls today showing that the numbers have diminished. Although
it had been increasing.
It had been increasing under George Bush. Now Now, John McCain, who's the presidential candidate, is somewhat of a different Republican. He comes from a border state. He is more tolerant on the issue of immigration.
So that's going to change the whole dynamic as it relates to appealing to the Hispanic Mexican-American voter, predominantly along the border region, all the way from Texas to California. Now, what makes an Hispanic or a Mexican-American voter different than, let's say, the blacks, who have been the number one voting group minority across the United States? What makes an Hispanic family different? What are they interested in that would be different from a black voter and a black family?
Oh, a different history, different religious traditions, different cultural history, slavery, a variety of historical differences.
Yeah, we got here because we wanted to get here.
Yeah.
Had to swim to get here.
Yeah. Or the
blacks could not have swam all the way across from Africa.
Or the border moved. Or the border moved. That's right.
Exactly.
Hispanics tend to be very family-centric. We tend to be collective in our thinking. We traditionally have been Catholic, although that's changing. And the dynamics of the Catholic vote have been significant in Pennsylvania with regards to white ethnics and they're voting for Hillary Clinton overwhelmingly. That same pattern of Catholic voting or independent voting or swing voters falling into place with Hispanics. Now, all Hispanics are not monolithic. There's a tremendous variety going from the Cuban history, the Cuban Americans, Puerto Rican Americans, Mexican Americans, even amongst Mexican Americans here on the border. Anybody from the valley of South Texas will know that there are subtle differences between even from a community as close as Laredo.
As the members of the platform committee of both parties watching this telecast and or webcast at rodwhitlock.com, what do they need to understand as they try to appeal to the Hispanic Mexican-American vote, because they want their party's nominee to be elected come November? Carlos?
They need to understand we don't have one leader. There's not three people and they speak for all Hispanics.
There's not a Jesse Jackson.
There's not a Jesse. If they want to reach the Hispanics, they better be prepared to talk individual family, individual people. When they're approaching it through radio or however they're communicating, they need to act as if they're speaking to one person at a time.
And they're not going to be asked for a donation to push.
I'm sorry?
And they're not going to be asked for a donation to push. They're going to be whoever they talk to, whatever leader they're talking to, he has something or she has something as an Hispanic leader that's going to be tied back to the family, not back to Jesse Jackson's position in particular, back to push to try to do their agenda.
We'll make up our own minds on what's going to be best for our family, our community, where we're at first. And that will spill over to the region, to the state.
And that hemisphere is the family, the needs,
Correct.
concerns, and interests of your specific family.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct. And we'll make up our own minds independently.
Political parties don't understand that?
I don't think they understand the diversity within the Hispanic community. You're speaking to a Cuban American in Florida, and you might assume, if you're not very understanding of this, that you're speaking to a Democrat. They have a long history of...
The Cubans vote 70% Republican because of the Bay of Pigs, because JFK blew it in the Bay of Pigs. They went to the Republican Party.
Much like the Jewish community, foreign policy is a primary concern for the older generations in the Hispanic community. Now, if you're in Florida and you also assume every Hispanic is the same way, you're making another mistake, because there's been large migrations of Mexican Americans, Central Americans, and other Hispanics who have different histories and different voting traditions.
Hispanic Mexican Americans will elect the next president of the United States. They predominantly will be living along the border region from Texas to California. What are they interested in? Number one, according to the Pew Research Center, 91% education. Next up, the economy. Next up, jobs, followed by crime, followed by immigration, followed by the very last on the list, the war in Iraq. This is a very different listing of head priorities as it relates to Hispanic Mexican American voters along the border. How is this different from mainstream America?
Well, actually, if you look at all the issues there, they sound like different issues, but they all boil down to the family, the community, education, jobs, even the war in Iraq. A large part of them Our kids will join the military just so they can defend the nation, America right now, who is treating them well. They enjoy being here and they want to protect their families.
Very patriotic.
Very patriotic. It really all boils back down that those issues that you just mentioned are the issues that maintain a family and maintain a community. So it really all comes down to that again.
Very likely they are dying in larger numbers in Iraq than any other ethnic group in the United States. Without question.
I don't know
Last
the stats on
time
that.
I checked.
Well, we have a large number of people from our community join the military. Many of them will join the infantry, and so they put themselves at greater risk. I know in my community we've lost a number of our sons, and it is a tragedy. We pay a high price. There's no doubt about it.
Now, Pastor Ortiz, you're a member of Colamic, a Christian organization. It says here that among Hispanic eligible voters who are evangelical, 37% say they consider themselves Republican, 32% say they consider themselves Democrat. So evangelical Hispanic voters over and above say they predominantly consider themselves Republican over Democrat.
Or you look at it that they're broken up into thirds again. Independents, Democrats, and Republicans. We're making up our minds, one person, one family at a time.
And you are an independent.
Correct.
Hispanics, at least along the border, are social conservatives.
Right.
Now, in larger cities, that may be different. It may depend on your age. It may depend on which generation you are coming from the old country. But my experience along the border is that we tend to be social conservatives, much like the Italian Americans along the immigrant stream that most Americans have gone through, or at least most ethnic groups and racial groups have gone through. And so because we tend to be poorer than the general population, we tend to be somewhat more progressive on economic issues. But we maintain our Catholic background. Those issues of family, if I could generalize a little bit, perhaps leaning more in the older generations to pro-life positions, traditional marriage, pro-military, things that you might identify with the Republican Party, although we have a long tradition of moderates and conservatives in the Democratic Party that hold the same traditions.
Now, the black voter started out as pro-Lincoln, pro-Republican Party because he gave them their freedom. They have moved almost totally to the Democrat Party. Now, what about Hispanics and Americans of Mexican descent? Traditionally in South Texas, La Palanca, there were no Republican candidates for many, many years, so they had to vote Democrat in many cases. But that tradition of only voting for Democrat candidates doesn't necessarily exist like it did within the black community.
We had, in South Texas, we had a boss system where you had to pay a poll tax.
Archer Paul,
let's
Duke
see.
Duval, all the others.
All the others. And they
A.Y.
would,
Baker.
They would, A.Y. Baker in my hometown, Jim Wells, the larger boss of the South Texas community, would pay your poll tax, round up the Hispanic population and get them out to vote. That's the way they controlled politics in South Texas. That changed in the 60s and 70s. World War II generation comes home. They come back with a new attitude, a can-do attitude, and they begin to change the dynamics of South Texas. The Voting Rights Act occurs, and more people got out to vote. In the Valley, in the 70s, in most of the small towns, the politics of those towns changed dramatically in terms of the ethnic makeup of the leaders. And since that time, Hispanics have been have had a large presence in the elected class in South Texas.
Now, Aaron, you're a Democrat Party National Committee man, drafted the platform in 2004. You've been very involved in the political process from the grassroots, meaning predominantly the churches who have been informing and educating and trying to communicate issues as it relates to the political leaders at the national level. Who's doing the best job right now as it relates to electing their president, the Republican Party or the Democrat Party?
That's going to be interesting because the debate's still out there. But the one that understands that we're going to make up our own minds and deals with our issues, we're family-minded, we're community-minded. We believe in the American dream, and we bought into it lock, stock, and barrel, and we want to see it advancing. That's why education is important. So the one that down talks to us, that tries to lump us all as a group and says the Hispanics should vote this way, well, we probably won't listen to that one because we're heavy into education because we want to be able to make up our own minds. So whichever one does the best job of actually communicating that.
I think everything he said is correct. I want to add this, though. It's which segment of the Hispanic population are you talking to? Because now we have a large segment of conservative, social conservative, Republican Hispanics, which is a growing part of our political market. We have, as I said, Cuban Americans who have a long tradition in the Republican Party. You have independent Hispanics being increasingly swing voters and independent voters, voting 2-for-1 for Hillary Clinton, for example, and voting 2-for-1 in California for Hillary Clinton over Obama. And we tend to be following the patterns of other ethnic Catholics that are going through the immigration stream, the tradition of white ethnics or Italians or any other ethnic group going through the process. We are just, a good number of us are just coming to be Americans into the mainstream and moving along. So the question is, which party addresses those different segments? We're now very diverse. Going back a few years, we were a bit more monolithic, but today we're...
Now, when the presidential election cycle really started to focus on Hispanic voters, predominantly of Mexican-American descent, Hillary Clinton came to McAllen, Texas, almost right on the banks of the Rio Grande River between Mexico and the United States, to put up her tent and declare, "This is my town, this is my area, I'm for you because I am Hillary Clinton and I want the Hispanic votes." Why? Because it is on the border. And in this journalist's opinion, based on the fact that we wrote a piece that you can go back to and find in 2004, what's the date on that particular document?
September 5th, 2004.
September the 5th. You want to go back and read it, you can do so, because by virtue of the fact that Hispanic, predominantly of Mexican-American descent, first generation out of Mexico, comes right across the border, South Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, kind of stop, get acclimated, learn the language, then those other generations move further inland and get maybe all the way up to the Canadian border. On the basis of that, is that why Hillary Clinton came to the border region, knowing that if she comes to the border region, they're going to talk to all those Hispanic members of the family all the way to the Canadian border if necessary?
Without a doubt, the valley from here to Laredo is the motherland for many of the Hispanics who live in Chicago, Colorado, and many of the other states in the Midwest. There are many Hispanic...
El Paso, Lo Mismo Cosa, Laredo, Lo Mismo Cosa, all the way to California.
That's right. But let me also say that, because I hear this all the time from my colleagues in Dallas, they'll always tell me that we have more Hispanics in Dallas than you do in the Valley, and we are very different from you.
Because they've been anglicized.
Some of them have, and some of them, there are a lot of recent immigrants from the state of Guanajuato who have moved to the Dallas community, and so they have a very diverse Hispanic population. But the point is that increasingly the large cities of Houston and Dallas and San Antonio are going to have huge populations of Hispanics, and they're beginning to flex their muscles in those communities. We have a long tradition here in the Valley of always thinking of ourselves as the motherland of Mexican-American population, because most of the people came in from Mexico either through Monterrey, Laredo. Many of the populations here can probably trace their ancestry to many of the founding families from Jose Escondón, the Spanish settler who settled the area.
And then many, even through the migrant farm worker routes, going to New Mexico, following the crops, going to Southern California, spread into California. Is that why that particular South Texas region really kind of has the flag and the mantle of being the first Hispanic homeland?
Well, New Mexico would probably debate with us somewhat, but I think so. You go to Kansas City, you go to St. Louis, you go to Georgia, you go to Atlanta, where there's a huge population. You go all over the United States now, and the Hispanic population is everywhere.
New Mexico has 31% Hispanic electorate by state, number one. California, number two, 19%. Texas, number three, with 15%. So that kind of bears out a little bit, but the numbers are in Texas higher numbers, more Hispanics by number. I think that in New Mexico.
That sounds about right. But it is a diverse culture. Like he had mentioned, Georgia. Georgia is a South American group of immigrants that came to Georgia, and you will almost find no Mexicans, but you will find Colombians, Ecuadorians, El Salvadorans.
So both parties are going to have their
Argentinians.
work. Both parties are going to have their work cut out for them, trying to get their candidate the vote come November.
What they're going to have to understand is that local politics is very important to us.
It's all local.
Across the board. Local politics is more important than who's really at the White House. So it's about local. If they can deal with local issues, they'll get our ears.
What should both parties do if they really want to get the Hispanic vote for their presidential candidate in November? 30 seconds.
Focus on the issues we care about, centered around family, jobs, education, healthcare, access to healthcare. Come and pay attention to us. Listen to us. Listen to us. Many of it have ignored us for a long time. We're now about to choose the president.
Make it like New Hampshire, touch the flesh, got to get to know us well.
Correct.
Carlos?
Understand that we want to do things legal. You know, taking care of our elderly, Social Security. Mexicans have their own Social Security system. They send money to their families in Mexico.
$20 billion a year.
Help us to solve the problems to be legal, and they'll get our ears.
And remember, Republican and Democrat Party, all politics is local, especially with Hispanic, Mexican-American voters across the United States. Stay tuned to us for more information on this presidential cycle. Go to ronwhitlock.com for any program 24/7. Till next time, adios.